As we continue our ramp up to the 2023-2024 NBA regular season, let's talk about the team that is most often considered on the rise, the team that is considered ready to take the proverbial leap. How ready are they and how exciting are they going to be? I speak, of course, of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. You can call me Chuck. This is episode number 177. Episode 176 was earlier this week. That was with Salman Ali of Red Nation Hoops. That was about the Houston Rockets and their surplus, their deluge of exciting young players, of darts, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore, how that all is going to work as they try to take their own step up. But today I get to talk about the team that happens to own their 2024 first round pick, protected top 1 through 4, of course, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that has proof of concept as being on the rise, having made the play-in last year and winning a game, as having proof of concept of having a legit first team All-NBA super duper star in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and in having plenty of dart equity themselves, from Jalen Williams to Chet Holmgren to Cason Wallace and more. And so to help me talk about this extremely exciting team, this team that everyone wants to hop on the bandwagon of, is Derek Parker, a co-founder of Draft Digest. He is at DParkOK, a man who started that site back in the comparative doldrum era of Thunder basketball, which is much shorter than people tend to think it was. It was just a couple seasons between excitement and between playoffs and last year. But Derek is excellent, one of the best purveyors of overall basketball media online, but draft or otherwise. He's fresh off of an OKC media day. He's making his Chucking Darts debut. So I couldn't be more pumped to get to it. And Derek, how are you?
I'm doing phenomenal. It's a lot of pressure, the build up to not only my resume, but the Thunder resume of the team to watch. Like you said, the team, all these people want to hop on the bandwagon. When they crash and burn, I crash and burn with them. So here's to a fun Thunder season. Hopefully they do well. Hopefully my coverage goes well. I'm stoked to be here.
And you are, what a young veteran you are, appropriately setting expectations. It would be very easy for you, very forgivable for you to say, I can't wait to see this team win 55 this year. Like, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. It's our time. It's our time. But one of the reasons I really wanted to discuss the Thunder is because the Thunder themselves, if you ask Sam Presti or you ask Coach Dagnall, they'll say that they're not trying to get ahead of themselves, that it's, this is one step at a time. Growth often isn't linear. This team and this organization is renowned as possibly the best drafting team in the league. And for a reason. It's because not only do they know how to identify talent, they know how to develop it. And whether or not there is playoffs in this team's future come next spring, which we'll get to towards the end of the episode, what is certain is that drafting and developing is not going to stop. And we want to start today with Chet Holmgren, who's number 2 overall pick, 2022 draft, missed all of last season, and is certainly the most notable addition, really, to this regular rotation, to this lineup this year. So, Derek, first of all, everything I've seen is that Chet says he's feeling great. It's like he was never hurt. I think he had a very good summer league, didn't burn the nets down, but flashed plenty on both sides of the ball. For this team this year, where do you believe he begins in this rotation? Is he a starting power forward? Is he a starting center? And how does that diet between those two positions look to shake out, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm already kicking myself because I am a fan of what Sam Presti has built here, but I'm also mad that how much they've ingrained all of those philosophies you've told me. Like, I go to these pressers and I hear the development isn't linear. I hear the positionless basketball, and it just like tends to leak through in these interviews. So now I'm kicking myself, but putting myself in the shoes of Coach Daignault, Sam Presti, the first thing they would tell you is that there is no 4 on this team. There is no 5 on this team. Each player on the court will have the ability to play everything. And there is some degree of truth to that. There were times that Jalen Williams, J-Dub played the 5. Kenrich Williams, very undersized, played the 5. Jalen Williams, Arkansas. And that type of versatility on this team isn't going to go away. It's not going to vanish the second Chet steps on the floor. Mm-hmm. That being said, Chet's going to be the de facto 5 on this team. He's going to be the tallest player in their starting lineup. He's the tallest player on this roster. He's really going to be the only player capable of like serious matchup based interior scoring. And that's a little conjecture for me, because training camp started today for them. I'm sure they haven't really got to play around with these lineups yet. Maybe a month or two from now, there's some advanced metric that tells them J Will at the 5 drastically boosts ball movement, yada, yada. But for now, I mean, Chet is essentially going to be your Oklahoma City starting center.
Okay. And so understanding the positionless angle, I did not mean to scoff. I understand where they're coming from. Understanding the positionless angle, then, what do you believe the starting 5 to be? That's another way of asking the same question. Because if he's the starting 4, it means that Arkansas, Jalen Williams, J Will is likely the starting 5. But if he's the starting 5, you got Josh Giddey, Shai Gilgeous, Jalen Williams, first team all rookie Jalen Williams as the other 3. So is the assumption that it's those 3, Chet and then Lou Dort, or is there another candidate for that 5th slot?
I think it's going to be pretty fluid, maybe the later they get into the season, but right now all signs are pointing towards that 5 that you mentioned, with Lou Dort being the 5. In-house, they are a massive, massive fan of Lou Dort and everything that he brings. There's metrics that probably aren't so kind to him, but at the end of the day, he is a really, really tough on-ball defender, really good at guarding superstars. No one else, save for maybe Chet Holmgren this season, is going to be able to do that consistently. So for all intents and purposes, he is going to be that 5th starter for a good while. It'll be Shai, Dort, Jalen, Giddey, and Chet. Yeah, that's your starting 5.
Okay. And so let's talk about then how the offensive pairing between Chet Holmgren and SGA will tend to emerge. Because again, from a developmental perspective, I think that is the most important part of this season, because those are by far your 2 biggest investments. I love Jalen Williams. We'll get to him, but Shai's your star. Chet, absolute, no doubt, blue chip prospect, number 2 overall. That should be the core of your team. Theoretically, that should be the core of your team. So do you foresee Chet being used like principally as a screener for Shai? Do you see, because Chet, part of what makes him so interesting is that he likes to play on the ball. He likes to attack mismatches on slower footed bigs. I'm sure he wouldn't mind running some inverted pick and roll with, J-Dub or with Dort setting screens for him. So how do you think the Thunder plan on developing the chemistry between the alpha dog SGA and the alpha dog in training, Chet, because he is not a shrinking violet himself?
Yeah, I'd actually argue, I think that minutes at the air quotes 5 is going to be best for that tandem. From a pick and roll perspective, Chet is going to be more mobile than 95% of the matchups in that pair. And Shai is already getting by these guys with ease. He's never really had a partner like Holmgren. I really like the 1-1-5 situation. Like you mentioned, this team is a team that thrives on screening in general. Mark Daignault actually yesterday at Thunder Media Day said that their most efficient screener last year was Shai. So it's going to be really interesting. Like you said, inverted. Everybody, every single player, especially those 2, are going to be able to play on ball, off ball. I'm not like a real X's and O's guy. I think there's probably X's and O's guys out there who can't even fathom what this team is going to be able to do. And especially those 2, it's going to be like basketball wizardry.
Wow. Okay. Now I can hear some optimism seeping out of your voice. You're letting yourself go there. I like that. I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that comment about Shea as a screener, because Shea, he's put on weight. He's an elite basketball athlete now with everything that he does, but he does not, he doesn't cut the image of a traditional guard screener, because his dimensions are more like, he has plenty of length, but he's a little slender, a little skinny, and you would not expect him to be able to hold up to really like set and hold a pick. But with how well the Thunder are coached and how ahead of the game they always are, I'm sure just the act of him setting a screen means that both guys are going to hug close to him a little bit, because they're going to be, terrified of him slipping or of him popping or whatever, and they don't want to leave him. And that gives a little airspace to whoever's taking advantage, on the ball on the other side of that action. So if they're committed to doing that, then yeah, I'm tempted to say that I think that Chet is going to have just everything set up to hit the ground running, right? That this, like, he's in such a good developmental situation. He himself is very coachable and has plenty of skill coming in. But when I have thought about Chet's assimilation into the league, I think that he will belong right away. I don't think he'll look overmatched, but I also think that it is maybe a bit underrated, not internally with the Thunder, but maybe externally with people looking at them, that there's going to be like a real adjustment period for him, NBA speed, NBA physicality, and being asked to play a major role for a team with at least solid aspirations, like wanting to get back to the play-in aspirations at the very least in a very crowded Western Conference. Like, if he's the de facto 5, Chet's was a great defensive prospect as an anchor. His instincts, his footwork, how he reads the game as a low man are excellent. He, there's tons of tape of him baiting guys into trying to post him up only to turn away their shots and turn what seems to be an efficient look into a very inefficient one. And he has like really, really good touch and a shot that should never, ever be blocked. So like the tools are all there, but I tend to think that giving him big minutes at the 5 right away is maybe intentionally throwing him into the fire a little bit. And there's going to be some rough nights when he goes up against some of these 5s, your Valanciunas, Steven Adams, DeAndre Ayton, to say nothing of the perennial all NBA types that I think could beat him up a little bit. Do you believe that the Thunder will leave him sort of, not on an island, because the Thunder defense is so, like, they shade help all the time, especially inside. But do you believe that they will leave him to embrace those matchups just to see what he's got against those guys? Or will they try to hide him?
I think it's a great point that you make of them throwing him into the fire, essentially. It's especially been apparent because he was injured for the entire year, that while he does kind of galvanize everything that the Thunder do, like they don't have rim protection, they don't have height, length the way he has it. He does basically cover every hole that the Thunder have. He's also not this savior that's going to come in and essentially make this team perfect, send them to the championship, be the perfect prospect. There's absolutely, and this is almost me talking more to Thunder fans than anything, going to be a period where he doesn't look amazing. He's very much learning the ropes. They are throwing him into the fire. They're leaving him on an island. And I think he's absolutely, from what I've learned about him, a player that will embrace that. He seems to have the mentality of he's going to go and figure out to the best of his ability how to navigate that. But overall, this is all an adjustment period to figure out how to best use him. If they find that leaving him at the 5, like you're saying, on an island isn't the best way to maximize him, then they'll pivot from that and they'll use one of the plenty of other options. I think this is again, we'll talk about it later. This is one of the things that could make this season maybe less good on paper, but from a development standpoint, again, not linear, the team will get better via this situation and other things like that.
Yeah, I think that's unsurprisingly when talking about OKC, I think that's the right way to go about it. And I also think giving him a lot of minutes at the nominal 5 makes sense too, because that tends to be the best way to give a gifted big the chance to best capitalize on their talents. It's become very fashionable over the last 5 years or so in the NBA to have these giant 7-foot or near 7-foot weak side helpers at power forward. Robert Williams III isn't nearly 7 feet, but he's crazy athlete, 7'2", 7'3" wingspan. Jaren Jackson Jr., Evan Mobley, a lot of these guys play with another big to fully weaponize their ground coverage, their ability to erase shots at the rim on defense. But the truth of the matter is, if you are going to return, for example, in Chet's case, top 2 draft value, you need to be a lethal offensive player. The best 2 players in any draft are always going to be lethal offensive players. It's
right.
That great offense beats great defense is a cliche, but it's true. And so to be a great player, you need to be a great offensive player in, 99 out of 100 cases. So, and Chet, if you are a guy like Chet, who very unique physical specimen, but not someone with a blinding first step, you kind of need to have that matchup against other bigs that are going to be a little bit slower of foot, a bit less comfortable coming out to the perimeter to guard you, so that you can really take advantage. If Chet's matched up, if he's on offense and a wing is guarding him, someone who is going to dare Chet to post them up, Chet still has solutions or potential solutions for that problem. But now you're getting into sort of fadeaways, and you're getting away from sort of seeking the most efficient kinds of shots on the floor. And so I think putting him in, frequent pick and rolls with SGA, very smart, because it gives Chet the best chance to sort of be great. And you got to give yourself the chance to be great. As far as the other sorts of mini partnerships that could happen with Chet across this roster, because he doesn't just need to build chemistry with SGA,
right?
He needs to build chemistry with everyone. How do you see him and Giddey coexisting? I've got some thoughts, but I just want to kick it to you. In general, how do you think he and Giddey coexist, for example, on offense?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a small part of me that almost wonders if on paper, because again, we've talked about it, Shai is that dude in every sense, first team All NBA. He is the man. He's the crown jewel of this rebuild, yada, yada. There's a small part of me that almost wonders if, in a connector sense, if Giddey and Chet don't almost work better in terms of table setting, just the size differential. Giddey's been really, really good last year about using his physicality to get to the ring. I can't believe I'm saying ring. That's an Australian thing. It's fully from just listening to him talk. But I think
great.
as a tandem, Chet just makes sense with Josh Giddey. It just, in my brain, I can already see it happening. We saw it a little bit at Summer League last year. I think that's a really, really interesting duo, and one that just makes sense in a basketball perspective.
So Giddey does love to get downhill to get to the cup. I'll just say cup. I don't know what nation would claim that, but I'll just say cup. And I also think that he's a very interesting player. I think there's been very premature speculation about his long-term fit on the Thunder and, just the general scalability questions. He's not a brilliant shooter. He's going to be spacing for SGA in the most important moments. Teams are going to cheat off him, blah, blah, blah. The Thunder are nowhere near having to make that decision yet, and they still want to see what they have in this. I believe Giddey is turning 21 in November, or this month, maybe he's turning 21. So he's still extremely young, and there's still opportunities for very interesting development. But if he is going to be the sort of all-around offensive threat that you saw in glimpses, we've seen it in glimpses, but especially late last year. He had that, I think, 30-pointer in the playing game against New Orleans.
Yep.
He's going to need to have a vacated paint so that when he takes advantage of going up against a smaller guard or small wing and he tries to get to the cup, like, he can get all the way there and he can really collapse help. So he can, use his brilliant vision to spray passes out. And they were able to construct some of that with Jay Will, because Jay Will, very willing to relocate and shoot his threes. But Chet is sort of the supersized kind of version of that. And if there's a like a vision of the team where I do see a very sort of smooth, instantaneous assimilation for Chet, it's the spacing that he can provide by doing a lot of similar things that Jalen Williams did on offense. Jay Will is probably a better screener than Chet, just again, broader, thicker guy like right now. But Chet is going to get a lot more respect from teams, both driving closeouts, getting to the rim, and as a general spacer. And when you vacate that paint, I mean, one thing that the Thunder have prioritized throughout the draft is guys who can operate on the ball and, beat their man and get downhill. That's Giddey, Dort, SGA, J-Dub, Cason Wallace to a certain extent. We'll get to him. And all of that is dependent on being able to play 5 out. And because Chet has always played 5 out, that's always how he's liked to play. I think that there's a chance that this Oklahoma City offense, which at times last year was like lethal, that's where I think they could have a reasonable expectation for being a good winning team this year as well. Do you see any sort of hiccups in the offensive assimilation for Chet?
In terms of what you just talked about, no. Like, obviously, everything you just mentioned is great. Like, 5 out, that's exactly what they want. They drive more than any team in the entire NBA by like a significant margin, like double digits more than the second team. In that sense, no. Obviously, there's going to be, like we talk about, physical limitations. Like, there's going to be nights where it's very overflaunted, but like Joel Embiid, like, obviously no one's gonna be able to stop him. Like, there's going to be nights where guys like that are going to get the best of him. But in terms of the system, like, I think, like you said, he just plugs in perfectly. And that's really at the core of like every year. Let me just go off on a little tangent. Every year there's Thunder fans that are like, why did they not draft Jalen Duren? Or why did they not draft insert, like, I don't know, Zach Edey? Like, why are we not taking Zach Edey 12th overall? Or next year it's going to be Donovan Clingan. And it's like, this exactly is why it just doesn't work. Like, Shea gets a good screen, drives past, and Donovan Clingan's like matchup is waiting for him in the paint. Like, it just doesn't work. The 5 out system is here to stay in Oklahoma City. It's everything that every player on the roster wants. It's everything the coach wants. It's everything Sam Presti wants to watch when he's watching the team. So it's here to say, I don't see too many limitations for Chet in that sense. I think it's going to work very, very well.
Yeah. How do you, like, going back to Giddey, one thing, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I hope that I'm remembering them correctly. What I recall is that when Shea was on the floor and Giddey was off the floor, the offense was like really fantastic. Like, like I think a 121 offensive rating, somewhere around there, 120, 121. When they shared the floor, it took a step back. Now, that's also probably when you're playing against starters, so there's probably some regression a little bit. But when Giddey was on and Shea was off, and you were seeing sort of Giddey lead an offense with, his vision, his game of trying to get downhill himself, it dropped to like below a 110, not very good at all. So do you anticipate when Shea is off the floor that Giddey is still empowered to sort of be a primary guy, or is, for example, Vasilije Micic, that sort of signing, an idea that they're going to sort of spread those responsibilities around?
So essentially, my thoughts right now, and this is a little bit of conjecture because, again, first day of training camp today, like we don't totally know. Last year, Shea played every single first quarter, every minute, and every single third quarter, every minute. And then essentially, Josh and Jalen Williams, J Dub, were left to run the beginning of the second and the fourth quarters, and a little bit of obviously the first and the third and yada yada. What I think will happen this year is obviously they start the core four, as I'm deeming it. Shea will play the full first and the full third. What I'm anticipating is they pull Josh and they pull Chet at probably the 6 or 7 minute mark of the first and the third, and allow those two to really be the focal point of the offense for like the full second and fourth quarters. So that kind of maximizes Josh's game, I think, a little bit in terms of like he's still running the offense like he did last year, but he's got this weapon that's like tailor made for his style. Like he can pass it anywhere on the floor. He's got incredible vision. Chet's a great lob threat, great at everything like that. And then I think if you surround them with shooters, that was really the reason Shea's, like you were talking about, offensive rating by himself blossomed. Is Isaiah Joe missed like one shot all last season. Like I saw him miss like maybe one shot. So if you can essentially recreate that, so instead of maybe J Dub with Josh, it's Chet, and then you surround that with like more connective pieces in terms of shooting, defense, things that really work instead of like multiple shot creators. I think it's going to boost those numbers a little bit. I think it's going to look more seamless, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answered the question. I kind of went on another tangent there, but
yeah, I mean, it's interesting that your impression is that like there's still a lot of reps earmarked for Giddey to develop chemistry in those spots. And I would not be surprised if it certainly started out that way. But in Micic, Micic is 29 years old. He'll be 30, I think, in January. And for those unfamiliar with him, this is a EuroLeague MVP, a multiple-time EuroLeague Final Four MVP. I think his team, FS, won the EuroLeague title in 2021 and 2022. 6'4" guard, slippery handle, but like a live dribble, like just shot maker, electric eel. Like this guy has a lot of confidence. He's very exciting to watch. He can do live dribble passes off either hand. He will let you know whenever he does anything really good. He has a lot of fun doing it. And since he signed a 3-year guaranteed deal, like good value for OKC, I think it's like 23.5 million. I don't know how the guarantees shake out, but like that's a real commitment, if nothing else, to a roster spot. And roster spot security is sort of underrated in Oklahoma City, where they've needed to make some hard decisions, and some hard decisions are probably still upcoming for them. So if you've got this guy and you've convinced him to come over, you're going to play him, I would think. And if you play him, though I'm sure he can connect, and I'm sure that he'll buy into whatever OKC asks him to do, in the same way that you want to set up Chet to like be the best version of himself, the most leveraged, advantageous version of himself on offense, I would think that Micic, who's going to, come off the bench, would be sort of the same way. And I also think that since he is this off the dribble shot maker, that he'd have a chance to maybe develop chemistry with Chet in a dimension that Josh may not be able to. Like, I feel like I keep trying to tease out like some tension on this roster where I'm sure like the vibes are very, very good. And I'm not here to ruin any of the vibes. But I really am interested in how this team like makes all these pieces fit. So for Micic only, how do you see his fit? Like how many minutes a game do you see him playing? Is he a consistent member of the rotation?
it's really tough. Like it's basically the golden question right now, because obviously Chet, like you talked about, number 2 pick, one of the main pieces of this entire thing, easily startable, like fits everything that they want. Micic, they don't necessarily have a Micic. Like you said, like he's very unique, very, very good basketball player, but they kind of do have some of the skills that he brings already, in the fact that Shea is slippery, Josh can pass it really well. Like there's a little bit of overlap there. Really, really tough question. I honestly, I don't think he is a consistent part of the rotation. I think I would be nonplussed if they weren't the team that ran the most lineups, like most versatile lineups out of any team in the NBA.
Yeah.
That, I mean, on the, like every other night they're rolling out a different lineup, different backup, different versions of the same thing we've seen, little tweaks here and there. You know, Aaron Wiggins, like on off metrics are insane, and he played like every fifth game.
Yeah.
I could kind of see Micic in all his glory. Like, again, phenomenal basketball player. I haven't had time to like really, really dive into him, but I know he's great. I know he's going to be good in the NBA. I could still kind of see him maybe being a piece that doesn't get as much run as you'd expect for a guy of his caliber. And that's just kind of the vibe I'm getting. Obviously, maybe he comes out and he is the sixth man who gets 30 minutes a night. Like you said, great chemistry with Chet. But at 29 years old, like, we got to remember, this is still, last year they were the youngest team in the NBA. The year before, I think they were the youngest in NBA history. It's hard for me personally to wrap my mind around a 29-year-old being part of the long-term game plan. To me, it's almost, and I'm not like a guy who's gonna conjecture trades and like really push for anything like that, but it's almost like he's kind of in that rehabilitation program that like Al Horford, Chris Paul went through, in the fact that maybe you run him out, he looks really good, and you dish him for assets in the future. I'm not sure. It's a really, really tough situation there.
Very interesting. You know, though I could see that happening, like that's possible, I would be surprised if that's what happens with Micic specifically, only because in Chris and Horford's situation, they both arrived in OKC like via trade, somewhat involuntarily. Like, obviously, if either player had their druthers, I don't think that OKC would have been on like a list of preferred destinations. And so
absolutely not.
So with each one, OKC, which again, as an organization, they prioritize like professionalism, acquiring professionals, treating people with respect personally, so that no one has a bad word to say about their experience there. You know, they want to be as drama free as possible. And so they assimilated both of those guys well, and then always with the understanding that both of them probably had their sights on going elsewhere, you know, as soon as they could. And OKC accommodated them. Micic, I just don't, even though they had his rights, I don't necessarily see him the same way. I mean, that is such, to uproot your life and really, you know, move overseas and really try to do this. I mean, Micic is chasing his dream. What he said the other day is that, like, I've been trying to get to the NBA for 9 years. I wanted it to be right. Like, I think this is right. I think this is it. I don't know that if he doesn't play well, he doesn't play well, right? And then OKC has all the cover for not playing him. But the idea that they don't have a pretty substantial role in mind for him would be surprising. Like, I think they're going to give him every chance to play productive minutes, like maybe 15 to 20 minutes every night, to see what he's got, and to develop chemistry with, you know, Jay Will or with Chet in the roles that like makes him comfortable. Because if you're not putting the ball in his hands, then he's another connector, but he's going to struggle on defense. I don't know that he'll be like a complete turnstile, because, you know, they do play defense in the EuroLeague, and he's, you know, a very successful player there. But it's going to be, you know, you would be wasting his talent to a certain extent if you're just running him on second units as a spacer in the corner. So right. I think they're going to give him a shot. I also think that he'll be like, I do kind of think he'll be pretty good. You know, don't you do you think that he will not play well? Like, what?
No, not that at all.
Yeah.
I think he's a phenomenal basketball player, but there's just several phenomenal basketball players already that kind of find themselves in like a weird, Aaron Wiggins being the biggest highlight there. It's like, he's phenomenal every single time he touches the floor. And yet, like, every single time he has a 30-point game, the next time he doesn't even see the floor. It's just really, I think Micic is going to be a phenomenal basketball player. I agree with you in every sense in that his ceiling is potentially so high that like not doing your due diligence and giving him minutes is probably a huge waste. I think they absolutely will. I don't know what that looks like out the gate. It's just really, really easy to find yourself in kind of a snowball of, well, if you run him out there with Giddey and Chet on the floor, and Giddey is hounding the ball, Isaiah Joe is making way more shots. It's just really, really easy to find yourself on this roster kind of falling down. I think he's going to have to play really well, and I think he can, absolutely. It's a really hard situation to assess for all the reasons that you said. I mean, this is a guy who at 29 years old is joining the NBA for the first time. Not a lot, if any, precedent for that. So it's a crazy situation. It's one that I'm absolutely excited to watch unfold.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you talk about these lineup combinations. They led the league in it last year. Last year, I think sort of a lower expectation kind of year. And though they're going to go by their process step by step, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, again, given the success the team had last year, it's one thing to say growth isn't linear. We're going to prioritize the development. But I'm telling you, like, Chet hasn't played an NBA game and he's going to expect to win every time he takes the floor.
Right.
And because Shea endured those down years and finally got a taste of winning last year, he's not going to want to take one step back to take two steps forward in 2025 either. So if we start to pare down this rotation, we'll put Micic to the side. We've got the five that we mentioned, J-Dub, SGA, Giddey, Dort, Chet. Jay Will, I imagine, is going to play because you need a backup big. He'll play pretty consistently, I would think. Kenny Hustle, healthy? Is he playing every night, 20, 25 minutes? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a huge, huge part of the defensive identity of the team.
Mm-hmm.
I would be shocked if at some point he isn't getting like major, maybe not starting minutes, but like down the stretch playing with the starters. Like he is a huge, huge part of what makes the team overall tick. So absolutely second unit and a guy I would peg as getting major run with the starters, quote unquote.
Yeah. Kenny also, by the way, for those unfamiliar, is like Kenrich Williams. His you want to talk about on-off numbers. His on-offs are absolutely like spectacular last year. Like unbelievable. Like that, like OKC is a juggernaut when he and SGA are on the floor. So I imagine, they're obviously aware of all that data and a lot more. So if he's an every night member of the rotation, Jay Will, you would agree, likely an every night member of the rotation?
I think so. This is more personal opinion. I think he's got some growing to do in a few different areas, but I think for now he's a part of the rotation. Yes.
Okay. So that would be a tentative 7. We think Isaiah Joe plays every night, or do they phase him in and out?
He's another guy who, despite playing really, really good last year, was a little bit phased in and out. He kind of got to the point he'd worked himself into the rotation. Now it's this year. You could have Micic step into that. You could have Cason step into those minutes. I would say he is a rotational player, but you might highlight him as a player who could potentially lose out on those minutes too.
And Wiggins, same thing?
Yeah, to a lesser extent. Yeah, I think he'll kind of have the same thing in where on-off numbers are great. He's a great basketball player, but there's going to be a lot of good basketball players on this team. So probably a guy I would say gets even less. Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm trying to sift through everything here, and like we have not mentioned plenty of players,
Right.
If I'm trying to sift through everything and figure out who are really going to get these minutes, in general terms, you're trying to win an NBA basketball game. The players that you want to bring off your bench, you're going to want a big, you're going to want to make sure that all the backup guard minutes are accounted for, even if a lot of those are staggering a starter like you would with Giddey.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to want at least a couple of wings. If the only real starting caliber wings that you play are to open and close the game, you will tend to lose those bench minutes. So I would think that if Kenrich Williams is one of them, I kind of think you have to play Wiggins like more nights than not. So like last year, I'll ask you, when he would find himself out of the rotation, who would frequently be getting his minutes? How would they sort of fill the wing in his absence?
It's a combination of a lot of people you wouldn't totally expect. There's Isaiah Joe lindy slipped in there. Tre Mann at the beginning of the season was getting a lot of minutes and kind of it slowly got less and less.
Yeah.
Lindy Waters gets a surprising amount of minutes. And these are all guys, obviously, like we're talking about, these can be pared down this season.
Yep.
But now with the addition of Micic and whoever else, Cason Wallace, like it just gets harder and harder. Wing specifically, like there's not a lot of true wings on this team. Like Jalen Williams.
Is JRE still there?
He is. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's a potential cut. So I'm not sure we can totally include him, but yeah, like I said, there's not a lot of like true wings. It's tough. And they just signed Jack White. Like it's very tough.
Okay. So who, like you mentioned the potential cuts, or you mentioned obviously the Jerry's potential cut. Who like the last 3 spots on the roster, who is sort of in contention for those 3?
Got the roster pulled up. This is very helpful. We've got Tre Mann, JRE, Bertans, but he makes so much money that like it would be really hard to buy him out in the position they're in. So he's essentially an ad safe in my mind. Yeah. We've got Keontae Johnson on a 2-way. Lindy Waters is now on a 2-way. Jack White on a 2-way. Olivier Sarr. Great working relationship with him. His agent, I think his brother will be a target of the team. That's just personal opinion in the upcoming draft.
Yep.
So I'm not sure you necessarily want to burn that bridge right now. Again, personal opinion. Maybe they do, maybe they don't care, but that would be it. Yeah. And then JRE, who we talked about. Poku, I think, is safe. Oladipo's a cut. That's it.
Poku's safe.
I think Poku's safe personally.
Okay. Interesting. Why do you think he's safe?
Still 21 years old. Showed a lot of improvement last year, despite the numbers still being pretty iffy. I think he was the prototype for what Chet. He was like the prototype for before they brought Chet in. He makes a lot of sense in some of these lineups we've talked about, and maybe he could be your backup big if Jalen Williams, Arkansas, doesn't totally give you what you want. Poku has more of a shot blocking, floor stretching tendency. I don't know. I think he's such a fun project. I think the organization likes him. He's improved every single year. I think he's just a safe upside pick on, like, he's totally a 15th, 16th roster spot guy to me.
Okay. I don't necessarily disagree. I've always had a soft spot for Poku, but like at some point when he shoots, the ball's got to go in. I mean, if he's going to stretch the floor, he's got to actually stretch the floor. And him still being so young, you're right. I think it would certainly be in keeping with OKC's ethos to keep him around. But when I start to think about like the realities of who they keep and who they don't, I think that Tre Mann would not be surprised if they cut him. JRE might just, like, on any other team would be safe, and I'm sure he would get scooped up pretty quick, but I wouldn't be surprised if they cut him. And when you then look at like, well, how do you mix and match? Do you still play all of this, different combination ball? OKC have said, like, if they want to, again, try to win, meet SGA's expectations, meet Chet's expectations, the structure they have on offense and defense, we talked about the offense already, is this sort of like 5-out ethic. So if all the center minutes are split between Chet and Jalen Williams, you're always going to have someone popping, or if you go super small with Kenrich Williams, whatever. On defense, it's similar because though, they're not a zone team per se, but they do prioritize taking away an area of the floor. and like having 3 or 4 guys with 1 foot in the paint as often as they can, almost baiting closeouts from supplementary players so that they can send their help in and deter a bunch of layups in sort of like a gang way, which Chet is going to, fit in relatively seamlessly. And you can run that system with lots of different players too. But where we start to run into these expectations externally of the Thunder about how can they make a step up, how good can they really be? They have this star. We haven't talked about J-Dub much, but I love him to death. How to finally capitalize on this talent and really push up the standings. I kind of think that they need to just have a little more size on the floor consistently. Like rebounding was a struggle for the team last year. Chet will help with that a little bit, but Chet's lack of strength as a young player is also going to knock him out of position on rebounds a lot. So if they really want to push up, they're going to have guys who can rebound supplementarily. Giddey's very good at that, number one. But if they want to go big and they want to make sure that they are at least competitive in sort of the traditional physicality rebounding subplot of a given game, do you expect to see Chet to share the floor with J. Will a lot? Or do you think that there are like members of their bench that they can put out there to help cover for that weakness?
I don't know that there's going to be one guy necessarily like J. Will that's going to supplement that. I think it'll be a combination of a lot of different people. Like you talked about, even Giddey is a guy that can cover some of those like traditional style center things that Chet maybe lacks a little bit, rebounding, strength, physicality, things like that. It's going to be much to the detriment of the Thunder fan base. It's going to be a revolving door of players like that. They're going to try absolutely everything. Back to the lineups, they're going to try Kenrich at the 5. They're going to try J-Dub again at the 5, which is ludicrous. J-Dub talked about it yesterday at Media Day, fully aware that that's insane, but they did it anyway, and they're going to continue to do it. It's going to be really interesting, I think, but it's going to be a revolving door. They're going to try a lot of different things, a lot of different matchups.
Well, let's talk about J-Dub. Santa Clara Jalen Williams, first team all rookie Jalen Williams. Jalen had one of the more, like, again, statistically stunning rookie seasons that you can remember. This is a kid who came in from a mid-major and shot 58% on twos as a perimeter outside in guy on a team that relied on him to like make a playoff push and to play in the postseason, which I can't give historical context for it. I released a piece a little while ago where I ranked all the players that are entering year 3 and younger in the NBA, or at least I ranked 100 plus of them. And that's 2021, 2022, 2023 drafts. I ranked Jalen 6th, which means that I view him as roughly the equivalent value of a number 2 overall pick.
Right.
So, and in going back and looking at how efficient he was on his volume inside the arc, and to shoot 58% on twos, your touch has to be just immaculate inside the arc. I just went back and looked at, like, have rookie guards done that? And in the last, 10 years? And the answer is no rookie guard has ever really come close. And I looked back and saw, like, what guards have done that, like, just in the league. I think he shot 58% on over 7 attempted twos per game. And the guards who've done it are like Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Devin Booker, like Shea himself, Jalen Brunson. Like, it's just, and I think the only ones who haven't made an all-star team, I think Malcolm Brogdon was one. And I think Gary Harris, when he was playing off of Jokic, was the other one. So when you're dealing with company that elite, and we've been talking about development and mixing and matching with all these other guys, like, if Shea is priority 1 and Chet is 1A, I think that Jalen is 1B. Like, I think that he does not take a backseat to anyone. And in particular, I don't think he takes a backseat to Giddey, because to me, I think that he has a higher, like in a vacuum, a higher ceiling. And I think that the things that he does will tend to translate to sort of playoff basketball more smoothly and more impactfully than some of the stuff that Giddey does. So if there is sort of an area where you think the team is looking for a leap from him, apart from playing center, which is like very silly, but fun to think about. Where do you expect that area to be? What do you think they want to see from him? And how do you think they will expand his responsibilities?
Honestly, he was so good at so many things last year that it's the only answer I can even give would be more opportunity. Like expand the efficiency you've already done with even more opportunity and go from there, figure out what you are in the league. I mean, like you said, he did some unprecedented things. Now go do more of it at a better rate, like that's essentially the advice I would give. I think, like you said, in like that 1B perspective, he's so malleable around a good 1 in Shea and a good 5 in Chet that like even I'm a Giddey truther, but even with Giddey out of the picture, like a 1-3-5 lineup with those three is like everything anyone could want in a future of a basketball team. So he's phenomenal. I mean, defensively, I'm sure there's ways to improve. I don't quite know what those are. Offensively, I would say more on-ball creation, but he did that at the end of last year and was phenomenal doing that. So more of that, continue to stay really active off ball. And like we've talked about, he's going to be a phenomenal basketball player.
Yeah. I think in closing lineups where, it is sort of winning time, obviously Shea can get you a bucket anytime. That's why he's a superstar. But if you're looking at how do you sort of guard other stars, and the NBA nowadays, basically every team has a player they would consider a star. So, guarding those sort of point wing players who are on the ball in the biggest moments, I think that is the responsibility that Jalen should be able to eventually fill. I don't know if he'll be able to fill it this year, but he's, I think, by far sort of never mind. I forgot about Lou Dort, but he is a very strong perimeter player, like physically strong. He has really, really, really good length. And if Dort is a hound for guards, I don't quite see Jalen as like a hound for wings because he's not as nimble on his feet. But they're those more sort of those bigger strength-based players, Luka to a certain extent, Tatum, these top tier kind of guys who maybe play a bit more deliberately and is more about sort of backing you down and wearing you out. I could see Jalen as starting to accept some of those responsibilities, but I haven't watched the Thunder as closely. Like, how good is Dort at guarding that size of perimeter player? Because to like, I would assume that he excels at Donovan Mitchell sized guys, Trae Young sized, like he can put those, Ja Morant. He embraces that kind of matchup. I'm sure he embraces any matchup, but he thrives more in those than he would some of the bigger types. So like, what sort of responsibility would Lou Dort have against those bigger wings versus a guy like Jalen?
Yeah, you would be shocked to see the job that Lou Dort does on these types of guys. I mean, in the last year alone, he has gotten props from Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Paul George, all for like final minute type things, which is like, I forget how tall he is, 6'3", I think. That's like unbelievable to do the job he's done on these guys, especially in crunch time. I don't know why they don't just shoot over him. I genuinely don't understand, but he's so good at getting them in uncomfortable positions that like you could not even have J-Dub like swap to what you're talking about and being that kind of like point of attack, like smothering forward guy. And you could have Lou Dort do that and you would be fine. But now having Dort, J-Dub, who everybody's talking about should be like the number 2 offensively. I think if you everybody wants him to be second on the team in points per game. And that's great. He could totally do that. I could see that very easily. But there's also a lot of offensive pressure that can be taken off that with Giddey, Chet, that maybe he can stem some of that into, like you're talking about, defensive and building a real defensive identity, that he could be like a phenomenal point of attack guy very soon, as early as next year. And then a guy that I think is sleepily going to be very good at this is Cason Wallace. 6'9" wingspan. I think wingspan is drastically more important to Oklahoma City than height. Shea and J-Dub both have 7-foot plus wingspans. Chet, obviously, huge wingspan. And Oklahoma City has never been shy about throwing guys, even rookies, into those situations, regardless. And having the options that they do is already special. So having this trio of Dort, Cason Wallace, and Jalen Williams, I think is all of the defensive identity you could want on the perimeter.
So you think Cason's going to like play a lot in the, like, this is back to the rotation question, but you think there's like a pretty safe slot for him then?
I think so. I really do.
Interesting. I'm a fan of Cason's. There's every reason in the world for OKC to have wanted him and to, use some of their excess draft capital to like not mess around, move up from 12 to 10 and make sure they get him. But as I'm sure, I forget his birthday at the moment, but I'm sure he's turning 20 shortly. He'll be 20 years old this year. Nominally a similar position that Isaiah Joe plays, nominally a similar position to what Micic would play. Mm-hmm. And though each of them play, Joe's a brilliant movement shooter, Micic is more of an on-ball pick and roll ball handler, Cason is more of like a connector's connector, like whatever. The point is, you can't play too many of these short players. They care about wingspan, that's fine. But too many of these short players on the court at one time, because though I love watching how on a string they are on defense and how committed they all are to, shading their help and making sure they know which shooters they want to let shoot and which players they want to force to drive. Like, I do think there is a limit to that defensive system. I think it is like a floor raising defensive system. But when you play teams with exceptional front court guys, and I don't just mean at center that could give Chet problems, but I mean, Giannis, LeBron, these guys, these jumbo type of power forward that can sort of take over and, win any matchup down the stretch. I do think that the Thunder system, that's where it sort of enters its breaking point. And so I do think that once it comes time to win, like maybe you see a lot of Kenny Hustle, Jalen, Dort, Shea, Chet, that sort of a closing lineup. I think if it were me, I would want to have someone who could sort of, more than one nominal shot blocker who could try to go and get something. Maybe that's what they're looking for in next year's draft. And like, they understand that's something that they don't have on their team yet. But I don't know. Like, do you feel as though their defense, which again, a solid floor raising unit, do you think it has a chance to be sort of top 12 this year? For example, like what is a reasonable goal for where it can finish in terms of overall points per 100?
I think it'll shade top 10. I don't know that necessarily it will finish within the top 10. I think there will be points where maybe in this month they had the number 6th ranked defense, and maybe this month they tried some different things, played a lot of Cason Wallace and a lot more Isaiah Joe, who can be a bit iffy. And this month they were the 17th. So I think Chet, obviously massive infusion of defensive talent. He boosts that a little bit, but in that same vein, the turnstile way that they play these lineups, it's not totally easy to maintain defensive success, which is amazing that they've done it these last couple of years. I think top 10 is a great benchmark. I think they'll get there. It's interesting because I totally agree with you in every sense of the height thing. Like, there's at some point, there's only so much you can do. Jalen Williams at the 5, or like Lou Dort, Aaron Wiggins, and enter other small guard on the court at the same time is just like not sustainable. But at the same time, like over the past year, it also forced some teams to go smaller, in the sense that, like, you'd think it would force Oklahoma City to go big, but it really flipped it and forced other teams to go small when it really shouldn't have. So it works a little more than you probably think. Again, I'm fully under the same impression of you as, like, probably not sustainable for the future. Like, there's a reason, like, so few 6'2" and under guys are getting drafted from here on out. There's a reason that Oklahoma City has prioritized length. I think every single player in their 2022 draft had a 7 foot or above wingspan. But it works marginally more than you think.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back, and maybe it's a regular season versus a playoff sort of question. For a team that is, if someone's coming in December and they're still trying to figure out their own rotation, and they come in and play OKC and they haven't, like, really, really scouted it out about how they want to attack this defense, and the defense is just sort of inviting these inefficient drives where Shea, who has great hand placement, can rip a steal, or, Dort can keep someone in hell. Jalen Williams is great, helping at the nail poking in, Chet erasing stuff, like seeing all these bodies on drives. Like, OKC was great at turning other teams over because of stuff like that, because they know how to make drives inefficient, defending them as a team on defense. So over the course of a regular season, maybe that holds up. And, if they really do have a top 10-ish defense with a closer like Shea playing 5 out all the time, maybe, 45 plus wins is, I don't know what their over under is, but maybe 45 plus wins is not so crazy. It is clear that they have in their mind this sort of, like, their own version of Spurs ball or Golden State ball, where it's like, there is a way to play. Like, there is a way to play Thunder basketball that we are so committed to doing that, like, every decision that we make is going to be in service of that offensive and defensive identity. And we truly believe this identity is the right thing now as we're developing, and it will be the right thing when it comes time to, like, contend for an NBA title. So I would just be like, I don't know if I'd be stunned. Like, it would be very educational for me, be very edifying if this style of defense translated at that level. Like, do you get the sense that Daigneault, like, this is not just installing a defense for the personnel that he was given, or installing defense because it's a great way for young players to learn help responsibilities, but he thinks that this is, like, the defensive structure to have to beat teams in the playoffs when it really comes down to it?
I would assume so. Like, I don't know what else I would say to answer that, when, like you said, every decision they've made has been, like, to further that specific goal, to further this defense, this offense, this type of team, this type of player. It's like, they have to believe that if they're practicing it now. They're not gonna, you wouldn't think that they're gonna pivot this early. So for next season, sure, but I would think that they fully believe in what they're doing now to get them to deep playoff runs in the future.
Yeah, yeah, that has to be right. It has to be, but, like,
everything in you though says no. But yeah,
well, so, like, Alex Sarr, is it Olivier Sarr, Oliver Sarr? How do you say the?
I think it's Olivier. Don't quote me.
Olivier Sarr. His younger brother could very well be the number 1 overall pick, playing in the NBL right now, and he is of the Jaren Jackson, Evan Mobley, like, monster 4-man who, weak side menace, can switch on to guards, just a really good defensive prospect. There is some question about how well he's going to shoot. He has some touch, but, like, that will be his question. Right. And so drafting, if they really want to prioritize a guy like that and draft next year, not to get ahead of ourselves, like, that is saying we are going to exchange a little bit of our 5 out ethic for this ultimate defensive monster, because we think that that level of defensive player is what is necessary to win in the playoffs really, really deep. And, like, obviously they want to make him a two-way force, but defense is his calling card, right?
Right.
But the gamble, like the mathematical like play that they do now is that through this communication, through prioritizing like a gang mentality towards the paint, towards ground coverage, in making sure you close out really, really hard and funnel those drives in to force those turnovers. The mathematical number they're making now is, because we always want to play 5 out, if we have guys who can cover ground on defense and buy into that system, we're just going to get like better shots than you that way. So it would be an interesting switch to say that, like, we know this means that on offense, we might be giving an opposing defense guys to sag off of and make it a little bit easier to defend us, but we still believe that's the high ceiling version. Or if they really want to buy into what they're doing now, just to say our offense is what we believe is going to basically win us these games, because Shea is just going to get us so many good shots. His partnership with Chet, like we mentioned, is what is going to ensure that we're always on schedule on that end of the ball. And then on defense, we're just going to like survive and frustrate you. I'm sure it's not as binary as that in the Thunder front office. I'm sure they don't see it that way, but that is like, I guess what I am so interested to see is this team sort of finishes its rise up. You know, what about you though? Do you like Daigneault? I'm not aware of his background. I know he's an excellent coach, but I'm not aware of his background. Is he more traditionally like an offensive guy or a defensive guy?
I would lean defensive for sure.
Okay. Yeah, man. It's just cute. Maybe I just have this a little bit backwards. Maybe. What an interesting team. What a truly fascinating team.
I think, like, at the end of the day, versatility is like fully the name of the game for this team. Like, obviously they have this method that we've been talking about for the last few minutes of like, they have a method on defense and a method on offense. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to be so stubborn in that to be blind to the fact that a guy like, let's say, Alex Sarr could throw a different look at a team. And like, that would be very, very helpful for the Thunder. Like, I think they're going to be fully aware of that. I think they've given themselves the flexibility of with who they've drafted so far to pivot to that now. Like, you, at this point, what is getting another like small on-ball creator who's good at defense give you? Like, now you can start drafting to really mix it up, throw different looks at team. That's my thought on it. Maybe I'm completely wrong. They'll be stubborn in their ways and draft exactly what they've drafted for the last 5 years. But I think they've given themselves flexibility in that to mix it up, throw different looks at people, and pivot to what they think will win. Like, maybe they play this season out, things don't quite go as well as they did last year, and they pivot to a different defensive style, multiple shot blockers. Who knows? I don't know.
I don't know, man. If they have a top 10 defense, this year's going to go just fine for them. I'll tell you that right now. Shea's too good at the end of games. They'll be just fine. But I mean, they took wingy bets in the 2022 draft. The guy we haven't really mentioned yet is Ousmane Dieng, who came into training camp like 215, 217 pounds, something like that, put on a ridiculous amount of weight. We haven't talked about his sort of rotational prospects and how he would be used. He is someone where, like, again, if you're imagining combinations, if he were to reach a point where he could play in a closing lineup as, again, now he's sort of a nominal 4. This is a guy who's 6'9", 6'10", with a 7-foot wingspan, to play alongside Jalen, SGA, Chet. Now you sort of have the wing bona fides on that team to hold up against the very best teams. I think that is a very seductive idea for me, because I was a big Ousmane guy in that draft. What are they saying about him? What do you expect to see out of him this year? Still a very young kid.
Right. I think, obviously, you talk about the weight. bulking is great. I'm not sure necessarily he's ready to be an NBA power forward, if that makes sense. Like his biggest knock on his game so far is how tentative he is as an offensive and defensive player. You know, he's really, really shying away from contact at the, like both getting to the rim, finishing at the rim. Defensively, same thing. Like not contact averse necessarily, but he's far from some like secondary rim protector or even like funneler on defense either. So I think if I have to pick a side, I think he'll see probably less minutes than most people anticipate this year. Like you've talked about, like they're going to want to win games. Like it's just absolutely a thing. And I'm not sure Jing right now is going to be a guy that you can plug in and be a better product overall. But he's still very, very much a part of like the long-term plan for this team. Like you talked about, like if he can really reach his peak as a connective player, even not even individually, I mean, the sky's the limit for both him and the team. So super, super interesting. I would probably hammer the under on minutes for him this season. But again, totally, totally a part of the long-term game plan.
Yeah. Ousmane, like for those who are, can't imagine anyone is unfamiliar with this game through this point of the podcast with us. But for anyone who might be, he was a dribble pass shoot prospect. You know, he has legitimate facility in the pick and roll. As OKC tends to draft, they want to draft guys who are like decision makers and have some sort of dynamism, some sort of dimensional dynamism on the offensive end of the floor. But your point about his tentativeness is right. Even in summer league where he had his moments, I still saw him like not be lazy or dog anything. But if Lou Dort is at one end of the spectrum in terms of like wanting smoke and, creating smoke out of little pieces of grass and flint, like you would in the woods if you're trying to survive, then Ousmane is towards the other end. He is not that physically aggressive. And if you are not that physically aggressive, then it is surprising how few connective players fit that description in the league who actually get regular minutes. Like,
that's a good point.
You have to really buy in and pull your weight and make your decisions quickly and be very purposeful in executing your role and know what your role is in order to lock down those minutes. The only players who can get away with not doing that and not doing that on defense are stars. Those are really the only ones that the NBA abides that sort of muted level of investment in. So I agree that the prudent thing is to say that like he's still like, if there's going to be a poster boy for sort of inconsistent rotation minutes, it would be him. I agree with that. But at the same time, I just think about sort of the general NBA equation, and if there's a team that bucks the general NBA equation, it's the Thunder. But the general NBA equation that like the arc of the league just sort of bends towards wings and players of Ousmane's size that can do some of the things that he can do. Like at the end of the day, that's where things sort of end up going. And though I love Isaiah Joe and love that he got paid and love that he has a role, though I really like Cason as a prospect, and I think that he could be like a long-term starter in the league. I believe that for him. I still just think that you're going to have to, like, this team is going to have someone of J-Dub's size or bigger playing alongside him on the wing if it really wants to get where it wants to go. And it's great that they want to target Alex Sarr. If Alex Sarr is going to go second in the draft, they're not going to get him. Like that, they're just not going to be able to put a package together to get him. Right. Even if they float Giddey, they're likely not going to get a guy like that. So I feel like I've said it's going to be interesting 29 times in this podcast, but I do want to see them at least push Ousmane and give him sort of the chance to fail a little bit. Obviously, you have to be careful about doing that. But I want to see them take a shot at it. Like, do you think that this team could, let's say, win a playoff series with J-Dub being their sort of biggest regular wing, a guy who is great length but 6'5", you know, or do you think they need that other guy, between him and Chet to really lock down a power forward kind of role?
Yeah. Again, very interesting. I think they could win a playoff series with J-Dub as your wing. But like that's not the goal for any NBA team. It's winning a championship. And
Right.
that is a totally different conversation. I would hedge towards no in that conversation. And everything you said about Dieng being thrown into the fire, essentially, again, I would bet there's a large part of the Thunder staff that fully agrees with that and that would be pushing for that this very moment. So there's like a multiversal timeline out there where Ousmane Dieng sees 20 minutes a game next year and like for better or worse is a part of the rotation. Again, I wouldn't bet on it, but like I fully believe that is a thought in this organization's mind.
Okay. So let's talk ultimate outcome this year. Okay. So you think the defense is sort of shading towards top 10. If that happens, if I give you a number of 44 wins, do you think that is a reasonable number, a reasonably optimistic number? Like, where are you expecting this team to fall? Let's assume pretty good health, like nothing catastrophic.
Right. There's so many facts. Like my brain goes towards like, well, how much better is the Western Conference? How much better is the NBA in general?
Yeah.
These guys.
That's what I want to talk about. Yeah.
Right. These guys are so much immediately better. Like I think me personally, I think the NBA is like probably the best it's ever been. So I think 44 is reasonable. I would bet the under there personally. I think it's tough because while the team as a whole is going to get what I think is drastically better, so did the Western Conference. And despite adding these guys in like Holmgren, Wallace, Micic, and like internal development, I just like there's ways that you can get better as a team, and their on paper record is still not going to show that in the NBA. Like that can just be a thing. So I think 40 to 45 would probably be my range. And again, these things aren't linear. We're going to see this improvement. We're going to watch them figure things out in real time and compete at a high level, but the record might not reflect that. So,
yeah, the way that I sort of view it is, though this conversation is maybe a bit more optimistic on them, but I can't get out of my head that like I just think it's going to be hard for the team to consistently be the more physical overall team. I don't think that they're gonna like Dort is physical all day, but Shea is what, 24, 25, like right around there.
25,
and Giddey, J-Dub, Chet are all younger than him. Like, and the sort of boring truth is that guys in their late 20s, early 30s in the NBA, like they win those physical battles. They've been playing together for years. They win games. So when I look at the West, Minnesota, for example, I don't know if they're projected to win roughly the same amount of games. I would imagine they are, early 40s, that sort of thing. I would expect them, for as much drama and inner turmoil as they have, to be better than the Thunder. That is what I believe. Like, weirdness with fit aside, if you look at the Pelicans, because I can't assume good health with the Pelicans, I would probably say I would expect the Thunder to be better than the Pels. When I look at the Clippers, same sort of deal. It's hard to assume really good health with them. I might give the Thunder the edge towards them, but I expect the Wolves to be a top 6 team. So I guess I would think that the Thunder are maybe in that somewhere between sort of 6 and 8 discussion. Like if I ask you to compare them to the Grizzlies, because Ja's going to be missing these 25 games, but a team with such sort of institutional confidence in their own right, a history of playing really well. They obviously acquired Marcus Smart very intentionally. They're going to be very, very physical, very strong. You know, Steven Adams is that sort of 31-year-old just beast to set a tone of physicality every night. Do you think the Thunder, are you more optimistic on the Thunder this year than you are on the Grizzlies as a regular season team?
Oh, firstly, I think the thing that both of these teams have going for them, and kind of not, I guess, because of Ja, but I think the fresh legs is like a huge, huge factor in this Western Conference. Like on paper, maybe I would lean the Clippers over the Thunder. But again, health wise, like the Thunder being mostly sub 25 is a huge advantage, even if they're still working out the kinks on a young team. So I think that's huge in general. I would lean the Grizzlies being a better basketball team. I mean, I think they're more talented. Like you said, more physical. They're constructed from such a like you said, intentional way. And the Thunder, it is intentional, but we don't know what it looks like yet. Like it has not manifested itself on court yet because of the fact that Chet Holmgren hasn't played, because of the fact they haven't involved these new ball handlers that they have. So I would lean Grizzlies despite the Thunder having a very high ceiling. We just don't know what it looks like yet.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. And if you look at, the teams that are projected at the top of those standings, Denver, Phoenix, the Lakers, I more or less agree with all that. I think those teams are all very deep or maybe not the Suns, but high end talent and or very deep. So
right.
I don't quite see the leap that people are projecting. Like, if the Thunder were to make a leap where they are now, threatening to host a playoff series this year, which, like, if you win 50 wins in this West with how jumbled it's going to be, you're likely to be a top 4 seed, which some people are projecting for the Thunder. If they were to make that leap, like, they're just going to be a dynasty. Like, I can't, for players that young to win 50 games in this West would legitimately shock me, especially when they only have, 2 regulars over 6'6". My brain would just break. But as a team that will be better than they were last year, I likely to maybe be in that sort of 40 win range right around there and still have plenty of optimism left over. I still consider that a very, very good season. I think their ceiling is probably around the mid 40s. That's, I think, sort of, if everything goes well, and Chet's rookie of the year or whatever, that's sort of what you're looking at. But the team that, like, it's one thing to say the future's bright, but the future is like, it's like such a visionary thing because just they don't play basketball like other teams. It literally leaves me speechless. This team has been sort of a boogeyman team for me to cover because they are so much less predictable in how they improve and how they develop. Like, I feel like they are the bleeding edge of NBA development, and I just can't wait to see where they go. Is there anyone on the team or any aspect of their season this year that you feel like we haven't given enough time to, or that you want to touch?
Yeah, I mean, for all the things that you mentioned, they're so unpredictable that me hopping on podcasts like this and like attempting to predict rotational minutes for X and this guy is like so tough. Like, I could be completely wrong about everything. I'm giving my best estimation, which is like 0 because they're a complete lockbox in every sort of information giving and everything like that. Honestly, again, personal opinion, I think Trey Mann has a decent chance at getting back into the rotation.
Really? Whoa,
I do.
Geez. Nothing against Trey. I just I'm not ready for like another wrench in what I think this team is. But yeah.
Right. No, I get it. He kind of fills almost the same role as what I envision Isaiah Joe doing next season. I think he moves away from the ball handling, moves away from creating shots for himself, and really, from what I've heard, really leans into making easier decisions. So shooting, driving, passing, playing better defense. Like, there's a chance, I think, he really could work his way into the back end of the rotation. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be 25 minutes a night, not at all, but he could shock people in that sense. But other than that, I mean, I think we've pretty comprehensively covered the squad.
Okay. Well,
as
then
best we could.
let's try to put something like, let's try to commit to something. This is, I try to avoid these sort of hacky things, but I'm just going to start to throw like little predictions to you, and you tell me which side of the fence you're on, at least today. Okay. So if I were to say, I think Jalen Williams averaged, I think 14 and a half last year is what he ended up at, I believe, right around there. If I were to say 17 and a half points a game for Jalen Williams, would you say that he finishes over or under that mark?
I would say under.
Under. Okay. If I were to say, let's use what he averaged last year, 14 and a half points per game for Chet Holmgren, do you think he finishes over or under that mark?
Ooh, I want to push because that's a great mark. I would say I would say under.
Under. Okay. So who is the second leading scorer on the Thunder? Is it Jalen Williams? Is it Josh Giddey? Or I guess Lou Dort would be the other candidate then.
I would say Josh Giddey. I think the foul drawing will be much improved. I think that'll be a decent boost to an already like improving overall offensive game.
Fascinating. Okay. So if he's the second leading scorer, is he also then like the leading rebounder on the team? Or do you think that Chet still sort of outpaces him? Because he averaged, what did he average? About 8 boards a game last year?
I want to say he was a leading rebounder last year. Obviously, again, different situation with Chet. He very well could. Like, for all of Chet's pros, rebounding is like something that probably needs to improve.
Yeah.
Generally, in a general sense. So I think that'll be really, really close. I lean Chet, though. I lean Chet.
Okay. I think to push back a bit, I think that Jalen is going to outscore Giddey. Okay. I really do like Giddey. Truly one of the more sort of exciting, confusing players in the league to watch. But I can't get over, if I'm just sort of thinking about the usage pie, if a lot of his creation is going to come against second units, maybe there's enough talent there where he just sort of cooks them, and that's where he really sort of racks up his points from. But I can't shake the feeling that Jalen is just like, he's going to play, 30 to 35 minutes a night and is going to get so many chances in that sort of egalitarian offensive system to access his touch, to hit his threes, to work on his own foul drawing. Because as a physical guy, he's going to be able to initiate a lot of contact. So I do think it will be clear by the end of the season that he is the better prospect than Giddey. And as for Chet, do you think that Chet is a first team all rookie selection at the end of this year?
Ooh, it's such a loaded class that it would take a long time to like truly dive into what I thought. I lean yes. There's definitely a scenario there where he's not. Like, I think people have really, really high expectations for him. There's going to be some lows in this season for sure. I lean yes, though, just because of how good this team is. There can be so much pressure taken off of him from like almost every angle. That like, say, even Wembanyama is not going to have that. Like, Spurs are great, but he is going to be the focal point of the front court night in, night out. Like, Chet's going to be able to have pressure taken off of him. I think that's going to allow him to thrive. He's going to have good numbers. I say yes. I'll go optimistic. I haven't been too optimistic today.
Yeah. And I think yes as well. And I'll go further in saying that if he does not make first team all rookie, I think it is a disappointment. Because though I like a lot of players in this class, Chet, I think, were he in this draft, probably goes, 2 or 3, to start off with. I also think that if the Thunder are who we think they're going to be, which is a team that is around 40 wins or so, and he is a starter on that level of team, like, that player always makes first team all rookie. Like, you can't it's hard to imagine 5 players with more positive impact than that guy. So if he doesn't, I think that means that there's been sort of a real sort of rude awakening in terms of the physicality of the game, that they have to shift him to 4 more than we think, that he finds himself on the outside looking in of a lot of pick and roll actions where he's spacing more than he is initiating or running DHO. And it's like, okay, this is going to take a little bit longer for him then. Like, he's going to have to wait to physically mature to really become the version of him that maybe you and I are envisioning. So I would say that Thunder fans should expect that to happen. And ultimately, I guess the other number I'll float is who do you think plays more minutes per night? Cason Wallace or Isaiah Joe?
I think Cason Wallace. Now, if you were to say Cason Wallace or Micic, very close. What do you? I'll turn it around on you. Who do you think plays more between those two? I feel like you lean Micic.
I do, and I also lean Joe. I think both of those guys are going to play more than Cason. We hit it a little bit. I really like Cason as a prospect. I think he has a lot to offer, but for someone that's like, for a team that is already breaking in Chet as a rookie, at big minutes, likely, I think breaking in another rookie at substantial rotation minutes for a team that's trying to win and sort of maintain this momentum is really hard. And, I think that
well, hey, Micic, technically a rookie though.
I know. When you talk about first team all rookie, it's like, look out. But, Cason is a very interesting guy because you would think that being a Kentucky guard, he would fit right into the, like, Kentucky didn't use him right and he has so much more to offer and he was buried, and like some of that may be true, but he plays like he does not have a lot of like sauce off the dribble. I actually don't think he has a really good handle for a guard at this time. He is more like brute force, like really be as physical as possible and then like rise up even if it's contested and hit a floater, hit a tough midi, because he has really good touch and like knock down his catch and shoots. And I think that is like a really cool player, and defensively he'll buy in immediately, but it's hard. Like, not everyone's Jalen Williams. It's hard to rely on touch so much for your offensive output as a rookie in the NBA. And I think that Jalen maybe spoiled y'all a little bit from that perspective. And so I would just rather bet on the movement shooting that I know Isaiah is going to provide, like that easy gravity that I know that he's always going to provide on bench units, especially if Giddey's going to be running a lot of those. He's going to need all the spacing he can get. And so I think that Isaiah is just going to be sort of a better match for that. So that's what I would say. And I haven't looked at y'all's G League roster, though I probably should have, to see who's going to play for the Blue. But I could see Cason getting minutes there and just sort of, just because they're not available elsewhere.
100%.
That wouldn't be a disappointment either. That would just sort of be, business as usual. So I think that as well.
That's one bigger aspect to this, is that they're absolutely not afraid to throw Cason on the G League. Like, 12th overall pick, doesn't matter. They did it last year with Dieng, 11th overall pick. Obviously, way more project-y, but like they will have no hesitation whatsoever in throwing Cason on the G League team, like you said, if the minutes are not available on the regular team. So,
and as we've been discussing this multiverse, I do think the arc of the multiverse still bends towards wings. And my last bold prediction is that Ousmane more than 15 minutes a night is what I would think. I imagine you are taking the under in that scenario.
I will, but I'll be the first to tell you I would be ecstatic if that was over. Like, I would be just shocked and impressed, and I would love every second, good or bad, of Ousmane Dieng on the floor.
And do you think that Poku plays more than him? Do you think that like they have a real role in mind for him?
It's really tough because he just had another setback with his ankle. He'll be out 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane to think about. But for probably, I don't want to say a month, 3 weeks, Poku was like the third best player on this team last year for 3 weeks. You can go look up the numbers. He averaged like 2.6 blocks, shot 39% from three for like a stretch of 8 or 9 games.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal, looked great at like secondary rim protection, shooting the ball. He could handle, he could pass. Like he looked so good. And then to have the injury setback he did was so disappointing. And now he's had another one. If he had kept that momentum, if he was off the injury list, I'd be closer to saying he's that fourth starter, but injuries really set that back. So,
and for a team that still is, it's not as though they have like 5 max contracts on this team. I could see them offering Poku, 3 for 21 or whatever when it's and getting that done. But was he in that stretch? Let me ask, was he again the nominal center, or was he playing alongside another big?
That's a good question.
I would assume he was the nominal center.
I think he was.
Right. To be involved in actions that frequently, to amass all that stuff. But that's why I think that, again, like playing 5 out permanently on a team that knows how to do it and is used to doing it, and to have a partner in SGA, like expectations should be high for Chet. If that's the role they see him in, and they're not going to play him next to Jay Will, like you should expect some big things from Chet this year. That's so.
Right.
But this might just be me trying to like get to a place of confidence because the Thunder have broken me on my own podcast. But Derek, thanks so much, man. Anything at Draft Digest we should look forward to this year? Any work on your YouTube channel? I think you're at Derek-Parker on YouTube. Anything that people should look for there? Yeah,
I mean, I'm fully appreciative of anyone that goes and checks out anything on either of those things. I'm uber proud of both. I appreciate the shout out. Draft Digest, like you said, at Derek-Parker on YouTube. We'll start that back up again soon. Would love to see people over there.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening. This has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.